Picture this: the towering figure of Hercules, muscles straining, holding the weight of the heavens on his shoulders. Or imagine him locked in a life or death battle with the monstrous Hydra, each strike of his club sending shockwaves through the ancient world. These scenes have echoed through millennia, inspiring awe and wonder. But here's the question that lingers beneath the legend. Was Hercules just a myth, or could there be a kernel of truth buried in these fantastical tales? Today, we're peeling back the layers of time to uncover the real story behind one of history's most iconic figures. Ancient myths are more than just entertaining stories. They're often tangled webs of history, exaggeration, and cultural memory. Think about it. Why would civilizations across the Mediterranean, from Greece to Rome and beyond, cling so fiercely to the legend of Hercules? Could it be because he wasn't entirely fictional? Scholars have long debated whether figures like Hercules were inspired by real warriors, leaders, or even ordinary people whose deeds were amplified over centuries. The line between legend and reality is thinner than you might think, and Hercules sits right at its edge. From blockbuster movies to timeless literature, Hercules remains a symbol of strength, resilience, and adventure. But what if we told you the truth behind the myth is even more fascinating? Over the next minutes, we'll journey through ancient texts that hint at his possible origins, examine archaeological clues that might point to a real-life Hercules, and dive into the heated debates among historians. This isn't just about separating fact from fiction, it's about rediscovering the man who became the legend. So, are you ready to step into the past and uncover the hidden history of Hercules? Let's begin. The story of Hercules begins not in the dusty pages of history, but in the realm of gods and miracles. Born to Zeus, king of the Olympians, and Alcmene, a mortal queen, his very conception was steeped in divine intrigue. Legend says Zeus disguised himself as Alcmene's husband to conceive a child who would one day defend both gods and mortals from chaos. But such a birthright came at a cost. Hera, Zeus's jealous wife, would spend Hercules' life tormenting him, setting the stage for his epic trials. This blend of divine favor and relentless hardship made him more than a hero. It made him a symbol of humanity's struggle against impossible odds. Yet behind this mythic grandeur, historians whisper another possibility. What if Hercules was once a flesh and blood warrior, his deeds so extraordinary that centuries of storytelling transformed him into a demigod? Ancient cultures had a habit of elevating their greatest champions to divine status. Take figures like Gilgamesh or King Arthur, men whose real exploits may have been stretched into legends. Could Hercules have been a brilliant military leader, a revered strongman, or even an entire dynasty of warriors merged into one iconic figure? The line between man and myth blurs when stories pass through generations, each teller adding their own flourish. His famous 12 labors slaying the Nemean lion, cleaning the Augean stables read like allegories for humanity's taming of the wild. Ancient audiences didn't just see a strongman completing tasks, they saw a metaphor for civilization's fight against chaos. The Hydra, with its regenerating heads, might represent a problem that grows worse the harder you fight it. The golden hind, fleet and elusive, could symbolize the pursuit of something just out of reach. These weren't just feats of strength, they were lessons wrapped in adventure, teaching listeners about perseverance, ingenuity, and the price of glory. And here's where history and myth collide. Archaeologists have found shrines dedicated to Hercules across the Mediterranean, some dating back to eras before the Greeks adopted his legend. Could these sites hint at an older, forgotten hero, absorbed into the Hercules we know today? Or do they prove how a good story transcends borders, morphing to fit each culture that retells it? Whether born of Zeus or born of mortal triumph, Hercules endures because he embodies something timeless. The idea that even in the face of divine wrath or impossible tasks, courage and grit can forge a legend. The 12 labors of Hercules stand as some of the most iconic challenges in mythology. But what if they were more than just fantastical trials? Let's start with the Nemean lion, a beast whose hide was impervious to weapons. Hercules famously strangled it with his bare hands, an impossible feat, or so it seems. Yet some historians suggest this could symbolize a real conflict with a notorious bandit or predator terrorizing the region, whose defeat became legendary over time. The lion's invulnerable hide might represent the difficulty of subduing this threat, with Hercules' ingenuity using the creature's own claws to skin it, serving as a lesson in resourcefulness. Then there's the Augean stables, a seemingly mundane task that becomes extraordinary when you consider the scale, cleaning decades of filth from thousands of cattle in a single day. Instead of a literal stable, this could reflect early hydraulic engineering. Ancient Greek texts describe Hercules diverting rivers to flush out the waste, a feat that mirrors real-world irrigation projects of the era. Could this labor be a mythologized version of a groundbreaking public works project, celebrated as both a practical achievement and a symbol of cleansing corruption? The Lernaean Hydra, a serpent with regenerating heads, takes the metaphor even further. Each time Hercules lopped off a head, two grew back until he burned the stumps to prevent regrowth. This labor feels like an allegory for persistent problems like rebellions or plagues, where brute force alone fails. The solution, cauterizing the wounds, hints at the need for strategic thinking to root out issues completely. Even the Hydra's immortal head, buried under a rock, suggests some challenges never fully disappear, they're just contained. Archaeology adds tantalizing clues. In the ruins of Mycenaean palaces, frescoes depict lion hunts and bull-leaping activities that eerily parallel Hercules' labors. Could these artworks preserve fragments of real events, later woven into his legend? And in the marshes of Lerna, where the Hydra supposedly dwelled, excavations reveal ancient shrines, hinting at a local cult that might have inspired the tale. The moral and political layers run deep. For ancient Greeks, these stories weren't just entertainment, they were tools. The labors reinforced ideals of perseverance, cleverness, and service to society. Kings and city-states used Hercules' image to legitimize power, framing their rule as heroic and divinely sanctioned. By completing impossible tasks, Hercules embodied the Greek ideal of arete excellence through struggle, a message that resonated in a world where survival often depended on outthinking as much as outfighting your enemies. So were the labors pure myth or echoes of real events wrapped in symbolism, perhaps both. Like all great legends, they blur the line between history and imagination, inviting us to dig deeper, not just for answers, but for the timeless truths hidden beneath the epic. Long before Hollywood put its spin on Hercules, ancient poets were already shaping his legend, each adding their own brushstrokes to his larger-than-life portrait. Homer's Iliad, one of the oldest surviving Greek texts, paints him as a figure of almost nostalgic reverence, a hero from a bygone era, mentioned with a mix of awe and melancholy. When Achilles grieves for Patroclus, he laments that even Hercules couldn't escape death despite being Zeus's son. This early version of Hercules isn't just strong, he's tragically mortal, a reminder that no amount of divine blood can cheat fate. Yet curiously, Homer skips the famous 12 labors entirely, focusing instead on lesser-known exploits, like his sack of Troy years before the Trojan War. It's a glaring omission that makes you wonder, were the labors added later, or were they simply not part of his original story? Hesiod's Theogony takes a different approach, weaving Hercules into the cosmic tapestry of gods and monsters. Here, he's less a tragic hero and more a divine instrument, Zeus's plan to create a champion who'd protect Olympus from chaos. Hesiod's Hercules battles giants and storms the heavens, his labors framed as a celestial cleanup crew for the gods. But even in these grand myths, there's a fascinating inconsistency. Some versions claim Hera persecuted Hercules because he was Zeus's illegitimate son, while others suggest she actually nursed him as an infant, accidentally granting him immortality. These contradictions hint at something deeper, a myth evolving through oral tradition, with competing regional versions colliding into one unstable legend. Fast forward to Rome, and Hercules gets a full rebrand. Ovid's Metamorphoses smooths out the Greek rough edges, turning his brutish strength into something more refined, almost philosophical. The Roman Hercules isn't just a club-wielding brute, he's a cultural diplomat. Take the story of Cacus, a fire-breathing thief Hercules slays in Virgil's Aeneid. In Greek versions, this was a straightforward monster fight. But for the Romans, it's a founding myth. Hercules becomes the protector of the future Roman heartland, his victory symbolizing civilization's triumph over savagery. Even his name changes. Heracles in Greek becomes Hercules in Latin, a subtle shift that mirrors how his identity flexed to fit new audiences. The real intrigue lies in the gaps between these accounts. Why does Homer ignore the Hydra but later poets fixate on it? Why do some texts call Hercules a god, while others insist he earned divinity only after death? These inconsistencies aren't just scribble errors, they're fingerprints of a legend built from real-world influences. Ancient historians like Herodotus claimed Hercules began as an Egyptian hero named Harushaf, later adopted by Greek traders. Others point to Phoenician merchants spreading tales of Melkart, a god associated with strength and voyages, whose cult statues bear a striking resemblance to Hercules' iconography. Perhaps the most telling clue comes from Pausanias, a travel writer who catalogued Hercules' shrines across Greece in the 2nd century. He notes that locals in different cities worshipped wildly different versions of the hero, some as a demigod, others as a full deity, and a few as a deified mortal king. This patchwork of beliefs suggests Hercules wasn't just one man or myth, but a cultural magnet, absorbing the traits of countless local heroes over centuries. The Hercules we know today isn't a single story. He's a palimpsest, layer upon layer of history and imagination, each generation rewriting him in their own image. From the sun-baked temples of Thebes to the bustling forums of Rome, Hercules wasn't just a legend, he was a living presence, worshipped with the same fervor as the Olympian gods. His cults thrived across the Mediterranean, each adapting his myth to fit local needs. In Thebes, his supposed birthplace, priests performed annual rites reenacting his infancy, showcasing tiny clay effigies of the hero battling snakes sent by Hera. These weren't mere plays, they were sacred dramas blurring the line between storytelling and devotion. Meanwhile, in Sicily, farmers offered him the first fruits of their harvest, praying for strength to endure their backbreaking labor. Hercules became more than a demigod. He was a bridge between mortal struggles and divine aid. Rome took his worship to new heights. The Forum Boreum, the city's oldest cattle market, housed the Aura Maxima, a massive altar where merchants and soldiers alike sacrificed bulls to Hercules. Unlike most Roman gods who demanded ritual purity, Hercules welcomed all enslaved people, foreigners, even those considered unclean. This inclusivity made him uniquely accessible, a protector of the marginalized. The rituals here were visceral, the scent of burning fat, the roar of the crowd as a priest proclaimed Hercules' favor. For a society built on conquest, his endurance mirrored Rome's own rise from humble beginnings to empire. But perhaps the most striking evidence of his appeal lies in syncretism, the merging of Hercules with other deities. In Tyre, Phoenician sailors worshipped him as Melkart, lord of voyages, whose temple gates were said to glow with eternal flame. When Alexander the Great besieged the city, he paused to honor Melkart Hercules, recognizing a kindred spirit of ambition. Even in Egypt, where pharaohs identified with his strength, reliefs show Hercules wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. This adaptability wasn't accidental. Hercules embodied universal ideals' triumph over adversity, the mortal touch of divinity that resonated across cultures. Festivals like the Heraclea reveal how deeply his myth penetrated daily life. In Athens, competitors raced in armor, mimicking his labors. Winners weren't just athletes, they were living tributes to his legacy. Meanwhile, mystery cults promised initiates a share in Hercules' apotheoses, teaching that perseverance could elevate anyone to godhood. These rites weren't just about worship, they were psychological tools reinforcing societal values. When a Roman general faced impossible odds, he didn't pray to distant Jupiter, he invoked Hercules Invictus, the unconquered. Why did this hero-turned-god captivate so many? Because Hercules was relatable, his suffering Hera's wrath, his murderous rage, made him flawed, human. Yet his victories proved that even the broken could achieve greatness. In a world plagued by war, famine, and uncertainty, his altars weren't just shrines, they were beacons of hope. To light a candle for Hercules was to believe that no labor was too great, no burden too heavy for those willing to endure. The ruins of Turin, a massive Bronze Age citadel in Greece, might hold the first tangible clues to Hercules' existence. Its cyclopean walls, so named because ancient Greeks believed only giants could lift such stones, were said to be built by Hercules himself. Archaeologists have uncovered frescoes here depicting bull leaping, a dangerous ritual that mirrors Hercules' capture of the Cretan bull. But what's truly startling are the Linear B tablets found in the palace archives. These clay records, inscribed around 3,000 years ago, mention a warrior named Heracles receiving offerings of oxen and wine. Could this be an early reference to Hercules, or just a linguistic coincidence? The name's meaning, Glory of Hera, is ironic given the goddess's legendary hatred for him. Yet it suggests a figure important enough to warrant royal tribute, blurring the line between myth and payroll. Over in Thebes, Hercules' supposed birthplace, excavations reveal a different puzzle. The remains of a 13th century BC palace show signs of violent destruction, collapsed walls, layers of ash matching legends of Hercules sacking the city after a dispute with its king. But here's the twist: pottery shards bearing a lion skin motif, Hercules' iconic symbol, appear in strata before the destruction. Did later generations retrofit a local strongman's deeds into the Hercules saga? Or was he already a folk hero by then, his image invoked for protection? Modern tech is breathing new life into these mysteries. Ground-penetrating radar at Olympia recently detected an unknown structure beneath the Temple of Zeus, a potential earlier shrine to Hercules predating the Olympian cult. Meanwhile, isotopic analysis of weapons from Hercules-associated sites reveals some blades originated as far away as the Caucasus, hinting at a warrior who traveled widely or inspired cross-cultural trade. Even the Augean Stables legend gains traction. Sediment cores from the Alpheus River show sudden layers of organic waste around 1200 BC, suggesting a catastrophic flood redirected to cleanse a polluted area. Perhaps the most provocative find comes from Spain. A 4th century BCE Iberian inscription near Cadiz, a Phoenician colony, dedicates a temple to Melkart Hercules, calling him Bel letter 1 A63R, Lord of Tyre. This aligns with ancient accounts of Hercules founding trading posts beyond the Mediterranean. If true, it rewrites his story from Greek strongman to transnational icon, a symbol of connection in an era of expanding horizons. What emerges isn't a single man but a cultural phenomenon. Hercules' footsteps might belong to many, a Mycenaean warlord here, a Phoenician explorer there, woven together by centuries of storytelling. Archaeology doesn't debunk the myth. It reveals how legends crystallize around real human struggles, turning sweat and stone into something eternal. The name alone tells a story: Hercules in Greek, Hercules in Latin. This isn't just a linguistic shift, it's a cultural overhaul. In Greece, Hercules was a complex, often tragic figure, his labors overshadowed by moments of raw brutality. Take the murder of his music teacher, Linus, a single blow from his lyre in a fit of rage. Greek vase paintings don't shy from this darkness, showing him as a hero teetering between greatness and madness. Yet in Rome, those edges were smoothed away. Hercules became less a flawed demigod and more a polished ideal, his stories scrubbed of uncomfortable truths to fit a society obsessed with order and civic duty. Rome's version of Hercules wasn't just stronger, he was wiser. Where Greek myths lingered on his suffering, driven to kill his own family by Hera's curse, Roman poets like Ovid framed his trials as tests of character. The Augean stables, once a messy chore, became a parable about ingenuity and public service. Even his weapon changed. The crude olive wood club of Greek art was often replaced with a more refined, almost ceremonial staff in Roman sculptures, symbolizing authority rather than brute force. This wasn't accidental. Rome saw itself as the heir to Greek culture, but with a sturdier moral foundation, and Hercules' transformation mirrored that ambition. The Roman Hercules also took on roles the Greek Heracles never touched. As Hercules Invictus, the unconquered, he became a patron of merchants and soldiers, his altars standing at crossroads and marketplaces. The Aura Maxima in Rome wasn't just a shrine, it was a political statement. By claiming Hercules had visited the site centuries before the city's founding, Romans tied their destiny directly to his legend. Contrast this with Greek traditions, where Heracles was more often a wandering loner, his cult scattered rather than centralized. The difference speaks volumes. Greece celebrated individual heroism, while Rome co-opted Hercules as a symbol of collective strength. Syncretism deepened the divide. When Rome encountered other cultures, they didn't just adopt foreign gods, they merged them. The Phoenician Melkart, already linked to Heracles by Greek traders, was seamlessly folded into Hercules. Suddenly, the hero wasn't just cleaning stables, he was opening sea lanes, his image stamped on coins from Carthage to Cadiz. This blending made Hercules universal, but also muddled his origins. Was he originally a Mycenaean warrior, a Phoenician sailor? The more cultures claimed him, the harder it became to trace his roots. Even their afterlives diverged. Greek myths often show Heracles achieving godhood through sheer effort, burning away his mortal half on a funeral pyre. But Roman lore leans into his divine lineage, painting him as a benevolent force rather than a redeemed sinner. Statues of Hercules in Roman forums depict him resting after his labors, one hand on his hip, the other holding apples from the garden of the Hesperides, not as trophies but as offerings to the people. It's a subtle shift from conqueror to guardian, reflecting Rome's view of itself as the world's protector. This cultural chameleon act makes pinning down a real Hercules nearly impossible. Like a game of mythological telephone, each retelling added new layers while erasing others. The Greek Heracles might have been inspired by a Bronze Age strongman, but the Roman Hercules became something else entirely, a blank canvas for empire building. What survives isn't one man or myth, but a kaleidoscope of ideals, each refracting the needs of the civilization that reshaped him. Beyond the shores of Greece, another powerful figure casts a long shadow over the Hercules legend: Melkart, the Phoenician god whose name means king of the city. Worshipped in the bustling ports of Tyre and Carthage, Melkart wasn't just a deity of raw strength. He was a patron of sailors, traders, and colonists navigating the treacherous waters of the Mediterranean. His symbols: a club, a lion's skin, mirror Hercules' iconography so closely that ancient historians like Herodotus speculated they were one and the same. But the connection runs deeper than shared accessories. Both figures were said to have journeyed to the underworld and returned, a theme echoing humanity's timeless fascination with conquering death itself. The parallels between their myths are striking. Melkart's annual festival, the Awakening, involved rituals symbolizing his resurrection from the underworld, much like Hercules' descent to capture Cerberus. Phoenician traders carried these stories westward, setting up shrines to Melkart in every coastal outpost from Cyprus to Spain. Along the way, Greek merchants encountered the cult, recognizing similarities to their own Hercules. Over time, the two figures blurred. Melkart's maritime adventures might have inspired Hercules' lesser-known voyages, such as his quest for the golden apples of the Hesperides, which some scholars argue was a nod to Phoenician expeditions beyond the Strait of Gibraltar. Carthage, Rome's greatest rival, became a hotspot for this cultural fusion. Here, Melkart Hercules was venerated not just as a god, but as a civic founder. Coins minted in Carthage showed him alongside ships and palm trees, symbols of the city's wealth and reach. When the Carthaginian general Hannibal marched his elephants across the Alps, he claimed Melkart's protection, framing his campaign as a heroic labor in the god's name. This wasn't mere coincidence, it was strategic myth-making. By aligning themselves with a pan-Mediterranean hero, Carthaginians positioned their city as a rightful heir to ancient glory, a move Rome would later mimic with its own Hercules cult. Yet for all their similarities, key differences reveal how myths adapt to local needs. Melkart's worship often involved fiery sacrifices, including the controversial practice of passing children through flames, a far cry from Hercules' more personal struggles. And while Hercules' labors were solitary feats, Melkart's myths emphasized community and commerce, reflecting Phoenicia's sea-based empire. The real magic lies in how these stories merged, a Greek demigod's brute strength grafted onto a Phoenician god's worldly sophistication, creating a hybrid figure who could appeal to farmers and sailors alike. Archaeology offers tantalizing clues. In the ruins of Gadia, modern-day Cadiz, a temple to Melkart Hercules stood for centuries, its bronze pillars said to mark the western edge of the known world. Ancient texts describe priests diving into underwater chambers to retrieve offerings, a ritual that might have inspired tales of Hercules diving for treasure. Even the hero's famous bronze clappers used to scare away monsters find echoes in Phoenician ship bells, tools for warding off storms. So was Hercules a borrowed god, a stolen legend? Not exactly. Myths aren't static, they're conversations. The Phoenicians didn't just hand Greece a finished hero, they offered ingredients that Greek storytellers reshaped into something new. And when Rome later refashioned Hercules again, the cycle continued. Like waves erasing and redrawing shorelines, each culture left its mark, proving that the greatest heroes aren't born, they're built one story at a time. Crossing the sands of Libya into the heart of ancient Egypt, Hercules' legend took on a startling new form: Hercules Ammon, a fusion of Greek hero and Egyptian divinity. This wasn't just cultural borrowing, it was a full-blown reinvention. Ammon, the supreme god of Thebes, represented hidden power and kingship, often depicted with ram's horns curling toward the sky. When Greek settlers in Egypt encountered his cult, they saw uncanny parallels. Both figures were sons of a sky god, both associated with strength and protection. The result, a hybrid deity worshipped from the Nile Delta to the deserts of Siwa, his iconography merging Hercules' club with Ammon's horns, creating a visual shorthand for the blending of two worlds. The catalyst for this fusion might lie in one of history's most famous pilgrimages. When Alexander the Great marched into Egypt in 331 BC, he didn't just conquer, he sought legitimacy. His journey to the Oracle of Ammon at Siwa Oasis became the stuff of legend. Ancient historians claim the priests greeted him as Son of Ammon, a title echoing Hercules' own divine lineage. By aligning himself with both Hercules and Ammon, Alexander wasn't just flattering local sensibilities, he was crafting a mythic blueprint for empire. Coins minted under his rule show Hercules' Ammon with Alexander's youthful features, a deliberate mingling of hero, god, and mortal king, but the connections run deeper than politics. Egyptian texts from the Ptolemaic period describe rituals where Hercules' Ammon was invoked to protect caravans crossing the desert, a role the original Greek Hercules never played. Meanwhile, in the Temple of Karnak, archaeologists have found votive offerings bearing Greek inscriptions to Hercules' Ammon, left by mercenaries and merchants who saw the god as a bridge between their homelands. This wasn't mere syncretism, it was practical theology, addressing the needs of a multicultural society where identities were as fluid as the Nile's currents. The myths themselves twisted into new shapes. One papyrus fragment tells of Hercules battling the giant Antaeus, a story familiar to Greeks, but here the setting shifts to the western desert, and Antaeus becomes an agent of chaos akin to the Egyptian god Set. Another tale, recorded by the historian Diodorus Siculus, claims Hercules taught the Egyptians wrestling techniques, reframing him as a civilizing force rather than just a brute. These adaptations reveal how myths mutate to serve new audiences, their core themes dressed in local colors. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of Hercules' Ammon lies in art. A stunning bronze statue from Alexandria shows the god with a Herculean torso but Ammon's distinctive headdress, his eyes inlaid with silver to catch the lamplight in temple shadows. Such artifacts weren't just decorations, they were theological statements, proving that even in a world of empire and conquest, the human hunger for heroes transcended borders. Whether as Heracles, Hercules, or Ammon's son, the demigod's greatest labor might have been his ability to belong everywhere at once. Among the tangled threads of history, one name stands out as a possible inspiration for Hercules: Eurystheus, the Bronze Age king who, ironically, became Hercules' mythical taskmaster. Ancient chronicles describe him as a formidable ruler of Mycenae, a city whose towering ruins still whisper of warrior kings. But here's the twist: some scholars argue Eurystheus wasn't just a foil in Hercules' story. He might have been the original hero himself. Imagine a powerful leader whose military campaigns were so legendary that, over centuries, his enemies recast him as a villain, while his feats were grafted onto a new, more relatable champion. The Mycenaean palace archives, with their linear B tablets, hint at a ruler who commanded armies and demanded tribute, his name echoing in lists of offerings. Could these dry administrative records hold the ghost of a man who became myth? Then there's the theory of the many Herculeses, the idea that the legend absorbed the deeds of multiple local strongmen. In the rugged highlands of Arcadia, for example, ancient texts speak of a brute named Sickness, who challenged travelers to deadly wrestling matches until a wandering hero slew him. Sound familiar? The story mirrors Hercules' battle with the monstrous Antaeus, suggesting regional tales might have been consolidated into one superhuman resume. Even the Nemean lion's pelt, Hercules' iconic cloak, finds parallels in Bronze Age artifacts, ceremonial lion skins worn by Aegean chieftains as symbols of power. Archaeology adds fuel to the fire. A burial site near Pylos, packed with weapons and a boar's tusk helmet identical to one Homer describes, suggests a warrior class whose exploits could have inspired Hercules' labors. More tellingly, a fresco from Turin shows a lone figure grappling a bull, his muscles straining in a scene straight out of legend. But the real smoking gun might lie in Thebes, where excavations reveal a 13th century BCE destruction layer, evidence of a cataclysmic war that lines up with Hercules' supposed sack of the city. Yet for every clue, there's a caveat. Ancient chronicles like those of Herodotus mix history with hearsay, and even archaeological finds can't confirm which hands wielded the weapons they unearth. The challenge isn't just finding a man who fits the myth, it's untangling how dozens of men could have contributed to it. Like a mosaic shattered across time, Hercules' legend might be pieced together from fragments of real lives, each shard polished by generations of storytellers until the original faces faded into something grander, stranger, and endlessly compelling. Joseph Campbell's concept of the hero's journey, a narrative blueprint found in myths worldwide, fits Hercules' saga like a glove, revealing why his story feels so familiar even across millennia. It begins with a call to adventure, often thrust upon an unlikely hero. For Hercules, this wasn't a choice but a curse. Driven mad by Hera, he awakens to find his family slain, his hands stained with their blood. The horror of this moment isn't just tragedy, it's the catalyst that forces him onto a path of redemption, mirroring countless heroes from Buddha to Luke Skywalker, who must leave their ordinary world behind to confront the unknown. Crossing the threshold into the supernatural, Hercules enters a realm where lions have impenetrable hides and stables hold decades of filth. Here he faces trials and allies, some literal like his nephew Iolaus, who helps him defeat the Hydra, others symbolic, like the goddess Athena whispering strategy in his ear. These challenges aren't random, they're rites of passage, each designed to strip away his mortal limitations. The Nemean lion teaches resourcefulness when strength fails. The Erymanthian boar forces him to confront chaos without brute force. Even his darkest moment descending to the underworld echoes Campbell's Belly of the Whale, where the hero faces death to be reborn. But what truly cements Hercules as an archetype is his atonement with the father. Zeus, the absent divine parent, looms over his journey, both as a source of power and a shadow to overcome. Hercules doesn't just complete labors, he wrestles with his identity, torn between mortal frailty and godlike potential. His ultimate apotheosis, burning away his mortal half to join the gods, isn't just a reward, it's the culmination of every hero's quest to transcend human limits. Why does this template resonate so deeply? Because it mirrors our own struggles. Hercules' labors are exaggerated, but their essence, fighting inner demons, proving worth, seeking forgiveness, is universally human. From Beowulf's battles to Harry Potter's trials, the same beats repeat because they speak to a fundamental truth. Growth requires sacrifice. Hercules endures not because he's the strongest, but because he's the most relatable. His flaws, his rage, his grief, make his victories matter. The brilliance of his myth lies in its adaptability. In Japan, the sun goddess Amaterasu's retreat and return mirrors Hercules' descent into darkness. In West Africa, the warrior Sundiata overcomes disability to found an empire, much like Hercules rises from disgrace to godhood. These parallels aren't coincidental. they're proof that heroism follows a shared emotional logic. Whether Hercules was flesh and blood or pure imagination becomes irrelevant. His story survives because it isn't just his, it's ours, retold across cultures, each version a reflection of the human spirit's relentless climb toward light. The earliest images of Hercules survive not on grand monuments, but on humble clay pots, cracked vessels that once held wine or grain, now priceless windows into ancient mines. On a 6th century BC Athenian amphora, Hercules strides forward, his club raised high, the Nemean lion's pelt draped over his shoulders like a trophy. What's striking isn't just the scene's energy, but its raw brutality. The lion's claws still dig into his arm, blood streaking the black figure paint. This isn't the sanitized hero of later eras. It's a man mid-struggle, his muscles taut with effort. Greek artists didn't shy from showing his pain, the Hydra's coils tightening around his waist on a Corinthian crater, his face contorted as he lifts the heavens for Atlas on a Spartan cup. These weren't just decorations, they were moral lessons. Every scratch on his skin reminded viewers that even demigods earned glory through sweat and suffering. By the time Rome conquered Greece, Hercules' image had softened. Pompeii's mosaics show him lounging in gardens, his club resting benignly at his side. In one stunning floor piece from the House of the Faun, he's beardless and youthful, more philosopher than brawler, holding the golden apples of the Hesperides like offerings rather than spoils. The lion skin, once worn as armor, now drapes artistically over a tree stump, a fashion statement rather than a battle trophy. This shift wasn't accidental. Roman elites saw Hercules as a model of civilized strength, his labors reinterpreted as metaphors for ruling justly. When Emperor Commodus commissioned statues of himself as Hercules, complete with gilded club, he wasn't just boasting about power, he was claiming the hero's role as a bringer of order to chaos. Fast forward to the Renaissance, and Hercules undergoes another transformation. In Peter Paul Rubens' towering canvases, he's a mountain of flesh, his body a celebration of human potential. The lion's skin becomes a flowing cape, its mane echoing the curls of his hair, while the club, now polished like a scepter, hints at divine authority, but look closer and you'll spot subtle rebellions. Michelangelo's unfinished Hercules sculpture, intended for a Florentine piazza, twists in anguish, his face echoing the Piet as sorrow. Here, the hero isn't just strong, he's burdened, his body a metaphor for the weight of responsibility. Even the club takes on new meaning. In Jambologna's bronze Hercules and the centaur, it's not a weapon but a tool, pinning the beast mid-leap like a scientist dissecting chaos. The real magic lies in the symbols that endure. From Etruscan mirrors to Baroque frescoes, the lion's skin never disappears, but its meaning evolves. For Greeks, it was proof of survival. For Romans, a badge of office. For Renaissance humanists, it symbolized nature mastered by reason. Even the club, that simplest of weapons, becomes a chameleon, sometimes a peasant's tool, sometimes a king's staff, sometimes a cross in disguise. These artistic choices weren't just about style, they were debates about what heroism meant. Was Hercules a liberator or a conqueror, a martyr or a tyrant? The answer, it seems, depended on who held the brush. Perhaps the most telling detail appears on a tiny Etruscan perfume jar. Here, Hercules isn't fighting monsters. He's at a banquet, the lion's skin tossed carelessly over his chair. The message is clear, even legends need to rest. It's a reminder that behind every mythic image there's a human truth. That strength isn't just about what you can carry, but what you dare to put down. Hercules' story isn't all gleaming muscles and triumphant labors. There's a shadow that clings to his legend, one often glossed over in modern retellings. Picture this, a hero kneeling in the blood of his own wife and children, his hands trembling as the fog of madness lifts. This wasn't some villain's act, it was Hercules himself, driven to unspeakable violence by Hera's curse. Ancient playwrights like Euripides didn't shy from this horror. In his tragedy Hercules, the demigod returns from the underworld only to slaughter his family, mistaking them for enemies in a divinely induced frenzy. The raw grief that follows Hercules binding his own hands, begging for punishment, transforms him from an invincible strongman into something far more human, a broken soul grappling with guilt no amount of strength can undo. What makes this moment so haunting is its psychological realism. Hercules isn't just a pawn of the gods, his rage mirrors very real human struggles. Historians have speculated whether this episode echoes ancient understandings of PTSD, a warrior home from battle, his mind still wired for violence. The miasma, or spiritual pollution that clings to him afterward, reflects Bronze Age beliefs about trauma's lingering stain. Even his penance, the 12 labors, reads less as punishment and more as therapy. Each task forces him to channel his fury into purpose, rebuilding his shattered honor one impossible feat at a time. The Hydra's many heads, the Stymphalian bird's relentless noise, their externalizations of the chaos within, challenges designed to teach control as much as courage. Yet there's another layer here, cultural ambivalence about heroism itself. Greek myths are filled with heroes who falter, Achilles sulking, Odysseus arrogance, but Hercules' crime is uniquely intimate. His story forces audiences to confront an uncomfortable truth. Even the mightiest can break. The Theban playwrights who dramatized his downfall knew their audience needed catharsis, not just escapism. Watching Hercules wrestle with his demons reminded them that suffering wasn't weakness, it was the price of being alive. Archaeology adds a chilling footnote. In Mycenaean burial sites, forensic evidence shows skeletons with skull fractures consistent with sudden, violent attacks, potential echoes of real-life familial massacres blamed on divine wrath. Could Hercules' madness be a mythologized memory of such tragedies, a way to process collective trauma through storytelling, or was his tale a cautionary parable about the dangers of unchecked power? Either way, the darkness in his legend isn't a flaw, it's the key to his enduring relevance. A hero who never stumbles isn't a hero at all, he's a statue. Hercules' pain is what makes him breathe across millennia, a reminder that even legends aren't carved from stone, but forged in fire and regret. Look up at the night sky on a clear summer evening, and you might spot the constellation Hercules, a sprawling star pattern that ancient stargazers saw as the hero frozen in eternal struggle. But here's the twist, this celestial tribute isn't just a random honor. It's a storytelling device, a way to keep Hercules' legend alive far beyond the reach of mortal hands. The Greeks called him Engonosin, the kneeler, depicted mid-labor with one knee bent as if wrestling the Nemean lion or hoisting the heavens for Atlas. His celestial form isn't static, it's dynamic, capturing him in the act of overcoming, a reminder that even in the stars, his work is never done. The brilliance of this cosmic connection lies in its practicality. Before written histories, cultures used the stars as memory palaces. The curve of Hercules' arm might trace the path of his club, while the bright star Rezelgethi Arabic for the kneeler's head marks his determined gaze. Nearby, the constellation Draco coils like the Hydra he once fought, their eternal positions locking myth into the fabric of the night. This wasn't just poetry, it was pedagogy. Farmers planting by the seasons or sailors navigating by the stars would have known Hercules' story by heart, his labors mapped onto the heavens as a guide both literal and moral. But the celestial myth goes deeper. Some scholars argue the kneeler's posture mirrors older Babylonian constellations, where a figure squats in triumph over a serpent, possibly tying Hercules to the Mesopotamian hero Gilgamesh. Others point to the cluster of Hercules, a globular star group visible to the naked eye, which Ptolemy described as the nebula in the kneeler's waist. Imagine ancient storytellers gesturing to this hazy patch, spinning tales of it as the golden apples of the Hesperides, forever just out of reach. Even the timing of Hercules' visibility, high in the summer sky when the Mediterranean sailing season peaked, reinforced his role as a protector of travelers, his myth and utility intertwined. This cosmic branding wasn't unique to Hercules. The Greeks routinely projected their myths onto the stars: Orion the hunter, Perseus with Medusa's head, but Hercules' constellation stands out for its sheer adaptability. Roman astronomers rearranged his stars to hold an upraised club, while medieval Arab scholars saw him as a standing laborer. Each culture reframed his pose to reflect their values, yet the core message endured. Here was a hero so vital, his story needed to be written in light. What's truly remarkable is how these star myths crossed borders. Chinese astronomers saw the same stars as Tianji, a celestial marketplace, yet even they retained a warrior figure in their charts, proof that Hercules' archetype transcended language. Today, when we point telescopes at the Hercules cluster, we're not just observing stars, we're touching the oldest form of human Netflix, a streaming service of myth broadcast across millennia. The next time you glimpse those faint stars, remember, you're not just seeing a constellation, you're witnessing the afterlife of a legend, where a demigod's sweat still glitters in the dark. In the grand amphitheaters of ancient Rome, Emperor Commodus stepped into the sand not as a ruler but as a god, or at least, that's what he wanted the roaring crowds to believe. Clad in a lion's skin and wielding a gilded club, he reenacted Hercules' labors with a twist. Instead of mythical beasts, his opponents were often crippled prisoners or drugged animals, their fates sealed before the spectacle began. This wasn't just entertainment, it was a calculated performance of divine right. Commodus didn't merely admire Hercules, he sought to become him, commissioning statues that merged their likenesses, his own face staring out from beneath the hero's iconic mane. One such marble colossus, towering over the city, showed the emperor with Hercules' apples of immortality cradled in his palm, a not-so-subtle suggestion that Rome's destiny rested in his hands. But why Hercules? Of all the gods and heroes in the Roman pantheon, Hercules offered something unique, a blend of brute strength and popular appeal. Unlike aloof Jupiter or warlike Mars, Hercules was a hero of the people, a demigod who'd endured suffering, cleansed the world of monsters, and earned divinity through sweat rather than birthright. For Commodus, a ruler more comfortable in the arena than the Senate, this was the perfect blueprint. By casting himself as Hercules Reborn, he could bypass Rome's political elite and speak directly to the masses, his labors in the Colosseum serving as proof of his divine mandate. The message was clear: just as Hercules had tamed chaos, Commodus would tame Rome. The propaganda machine worked overtime. Coins minted during his reign bore Hercules' club alongside the emperor's name, while official edicts referred to Commodus as Hercules Romanus. Even the months of the calendar weren't safe. He briefly renamed September Hercules in his own honor. But the most telling detail lay in the gladiatorial games themselves. Where past emperors had watched from the stands, Commodus fought, though the matches were rigged in his favor. Ancient historians like Cassius Dio recount how he'd slay ostriches in the arena, then theatrically lift their severed heads toward the senators' seats, a silent threat disguised as victory. This cult of personality, however, had a fatal flaw. While Hercules' labors were about service, cleansing stables, protecting towns, Commodus were pure narcissism. The Roman public might cheer his theatrics, but the Senate saw through the charade. His obsession peaked when he ordered Rome itself to be renamed Colonia Lucia Annia Commodiana, casting the city as his personal fiefdom. The final straw came when he planned to march into the consulship dressed as Hercules, a move that would have erased the last pretense of republican tradition. In the end, the man who played God met a mortal's fate, strangled in his bath by a wrestler named Narcissus. A twist of irony. Hercules himself might have appreciated Commodus' downfall, proved that even the most carefully staged myths can't survive reality. His statues were toppled, his name erased from monuments, and the month of Hercules reverted to September. Yet his legacy lingers as a cautionary tale. The line between hero and tyrant is thinner than a lion's pelt, and no amount of gilded clubs can forge true divinity. The Roman philosopher Seneca took Hercules off the battlefield and placed him squarely in the realm of the mind. His tragedy Hercules Furens, Hercules Mad, paints the hero not as a triumphant demigod, but as a tortured soul grappling with the aftermath of his infamous family massacre. When Seneca's Hercules wakes from Hera's curse to see the bodies of his wife and sons, his anguish isn't met with divine reassurance. It's confronted with Stoic philosophy. Is this what it means to be strong? The chorus asks, reframing his labors as futile attempts to outrun inner demons. For Seneca, writing under the tyrannical Emperor Nero, Hercules' story became a coded critique of power, a warning that even the mightiest crumble when rage replaces reason. The play's climax, where Hercules debates suicide before choosing penance, mirrors Stoic ideals of enduring suffering with dignity, turning myth into a manual for moral survival. Centuries later, Shakespeare spun Hercules into something lighter but no less layered. In A Midsummer Night's Dream, the bard compares the love-struck Titania's infatuation with bottom to Hercules' madness. "Methought I was enamored of an ass." It's a joke, but a revealing one. By the Renaissance, Hercules had become such a cultural shorthand that audiences instantly understood the reference. Yet Shakespeare's other allusions cut deeper. In Antony and Cleopatra, the doomed General Antony imagines himself as Hercules abandoning his club, a metaphor for his own crumbling masculinity. And in Hamlet, the prince laments that his uncle smiled and smiled, like Hercules slaying the Hydra, linking the hero's cunning to political deception. These weren't just name drops, they were proof of Hercules' metamorphosis into a versatile literary symbol, equally at home in comedy and tragedy. What's fascinating is how these reinterpretations track with seismic cultural shifts. Seneca's Stoic Hercules mirrored Rome's philosophical turn under imperial stress, while Shakespeare's playful references reflected Renaissance humanism's love of classical lore repurposed for new audiences. Even the medieval Ovid moral essay recast Hercules' labors as Christian allegories. The Hydra became sin, the golden apples the forbidden fruit. Each era didn't just retell the myth, they remixed it, using Hercules as a mirror for their own anxieties and aspirations. The hero's literary afterlife reveals a paradox. The more societies changed, the more they needed him. Whether as Seneca's cautionary tale or Shakespeare's punchline, Hercules endured because his core conflicts, strength versus sanity, duty versus desire, were eternally relatable. Writers didn't preserve his legend out of nostalgia. They kept rewriting it because, like the Hydra's heads, his story always grew back, meeting every new age with fresh relevance. Beneath the sweat and sinew of Hercules' legend lies a question modern scholars can't ignore. Is this iconic hero a champion of virtue or a relic of toxic masculinity? Look beyond the lion skin and club, and you'll find a myth riddled with troubling themes: rage-induced violence, the objectification of women, and a narrative that often equates brute force with moral authority. Take his marriage to Deianira, a union that begins with Hercules battling a river god for her hand, as if she were a prize rather than a person. When Deianira later accidentally poisons him with the shirt of Nessus, her act isn't just tragic, it's emblematic of how female agency in these stories is often reduced to destruction or deceit. Even Hera, the goddess who torments Hercules at every turn, embodies an unsettling trope, the vengeful woman punishing male greatness. Yet to dismiss Hercules entirely overlooks the nuance buried in his myth. Some feminist scholars argue that his story inadvertently exposes the fragility of traditional masculinity. His infamous madness slaying his family in a fit of rage isn't glorified. It's a catastrophic failure, revealing how unchecked strength becomes its own undoing. Even his labors, often framed as triumphs, carry hints of exploitation. Cleaning the Augean stables was essentially divine busywork, and capturing the Cyrenian hind required stealing an animal sacred to Artemis, a goddess who famously valued autonomy. These episodes don't just celebrate heroism, they subtly critique a system where power is measured by domination. Contemporary retellings are wrestling with this duality. Marvel's Hercules comics, for instance, recast him as a swaggering but self-aware figure, using humor to undercut his own machismo. In one storyline, he joins the feminist superhero team of Force, confronting his past missteps head-on. Meanwhile, playwrights like Sarah Rule have reimagined Deianira not as a pawn, but as a complex figure grappling with love and betrayal. Even Disney's animated Hercules, though family-friendly, hints at this reckoning Megara's sarcastic defiance and Hera's absence from the narrative altogether speak volumes about evolving sensibilities. The most provocative reinterpretations come from authors like Natalie Haynes, whose novel The Children of Jocasta reframes Greek myths through female perspectives. In her take, Hercules' exploits are backdrop noise to the lives of women navigating a world shaped by his violence. Similarly, Madeline Miller's Circe briefly features a Hercules who's all swagger and no substance, a fleeting cameo that underscores how myths change when centered on female voices. These aren't just revisions, they're correctives, challenging audiences to see Hercules not as an untouchable ideal, but as a product of his time, flawed, contradictory, and ripe for reevaluation. Perhaps the real labor facing Hercules today isn't slaying monsters but enduring scrutiny. His legend, like any cultural artifact, isn't frozen in amber. It's a mirror reflecting who we are and what we value. The question isn't whether he was a hero or a brute. It's why we keep retelling his story, and whose voices we amplify in the process. The silver screen first embraced Hercules in the 1950s, when sword and sandal epics like Hercules starring Steve Reeves turned the demigod into a bronzed, loincloth-clad icon. These films cranked the spectacle to 11, Reeves hoisting boulders, toppling temples but scrubbed away the myth's darker edges. Gone were the family massacres and divine curses. This Hercules was a straightforward strongman, more circus act than tragic hero. The Italian studio that pioneered the genre, Peplum Films, cared less about accuracy than box office appeal, blending Greek myths with Roman gladiator tropes. Audiences didn't mind. They flocked to see Hercules wrestle rubber monsters, his biceps oiled for maximum gleam under the studio lights. It was myth as matinee, a far cry from the blood-stained legends of antiquity. Disney's 1997 animated Hercules took a different tack, reimagining the hero as a Broadway-inspired underdog. With Danny DeVito's wisecracking Phil as his trainer and gospel-singing muses as his chorus, this Hercules was less about brute strength and more about finding his place in the world. The film's most striking departure, turning Hera into a doting mother rather than a vengeful stepmother, erasing the original's familial trauma entirely. Instead of battling inner demons, this Hercules just wants to earn his dad's approval, a sanitized, kid-friendly take that swapped ancient angst for 90s optimism. Even the villain, James Wood's sleazy Hades, feels more used car salesman than god of the dead. Yet for all its liberties, the movie nailed one essential truth. Hercules' appeal lies in his journey from zero to hero, a template so universal it transcends time. Comics, meanwhile, have played with the myth's full spectrum. Marvel's Hercules, introduced in the 1960s, is a swaggering, wine-guzzling jock who pals around with Thor, more frat boy than philosopher. But even here, the writers couldn't ignore his shadows. Storylines like the Chaos War forced him to confront his past violence, proving that modern audiences still crave complexity beneath the bravado. DC's take, though less prominent, leans into the mythological horror, with Wonder Woman once battling a zombified Hercules in a storyline that resurrects his darkest impulses. Why does Hollywood keep recycling this ancient hero? Because Hercules is the ultimate blank slate. His labors offer built-in action sequences, his flaws invite reinvention, and his redemption arc fits everything from kids' cartoons to gritty dramas. The recent Hercules starring Dwayne Johnson even played with the idea of myth as PR spin, suggesting his legendary feats might have been exaggerated by savvy storytellers. It's a meta twist that acknowledges what the ancients knew all along. Hercules isn't just a man or a god. He's a mirror reflecting whatever we need him to be, whether that's a muscle-bound idol, a singing teen, or a cautionary tale about the weight of glory. The labors may be set in stone, but the hero, he's always evolving. Not every scholar is convinced Hercules was ever more than a campfire tale spun into legend. Some historians argue that his story follows a pattern seen in myths worldwide, larger-than-life figures stitched together from the deeds of countless forgotten heroes. Think of King Arthur, whose legend may have absorbed fragments of 5th-century warlords, or Robin Hood, a possible amalgam of medieval outlaws. Hercules, they suggest, is no different. Across ancient Greece, local strongmen, monster slayers, and even gods like the Phoenician Melkart could have blurred into one superhuman resume over centuries of retelling. Without written records from the Bronze Age, separating fact from folklore becomes a game of educated guesswork. The skeptic's strongest evidence lies in the inconsistencies. Why does Homer's Iliad, one of the oldest Greek texts, ignore the famous 12 labors entirely? Why do early depictions on pottery show Hercules battling creatures like the Hydra, while later Roman mosaics reimagine him as a philosophical wanderer? These shifts suggest a story evolving through oral tradition, not a historical figure frozen in time. Even the geography of his labors raises eyebrows. The Augean stables placed in one region, the Erymanthian boar in another, as if each community grafted their local legends onto a pre-existing template. Then there's the matter of his divine parentage. Demigods don't leave birth certificates, and Zeus's paternity smacks of a classic myth-making trope, elevating heroes by tying them to the gods. Compare him to Perseus, another son of Zeus, or Asclepius, born to Apollo. These lineages feel less like genealogy and more like narrative shorthand for this person is special. Even Hercules' name, Glory of Hera, is suspiciously ironic for a hero tormented by the goddess. Could it hint at an older, pre-Greek figure whose story was repurposed? Archaeology offers little clarity. The ruins of Turin and Thebes show signs of Mycenaean warfare, but nothing directly links them to a specific Hercules-like warrior. Linear B tablets mention offerings to a Heracles, yet that name might have been a title or even a typo. Without a smoking gun, a tomb inscribed, "Here lies Hercules," the skeptics maintain that absence of evidence is in this case evidence of absence. But here's the twist: even if Hercules never drew breath, his impact is undeniably real. His myth-shaped religions justified empires and inspired art for millennia. That's the power of collective storytelling. Whether born from one man's deeds or 1,000, Hercules endures because he answers a primal human need, not for historical accuracy, but for heroes who make the impossible feel within reach. The name Heracles rolls off the tongue with a weight that feels almost divine, but break it down, and you'll uncover layers of meaning that might just hint at the man behind the myth. In ancient Greek, Heracles literally means glory of Hera, a twist of irony for a hero perpetually tormented by the goddess. Why would a figure so famously at odds with Hera bear her name? Some linguists argue it's a relic of an older tradition, a title borrowed from a pre-Greek hero whose story was later woven into the Olympian tapestry. Others suggest it was a backhanded compliment, a way to acknowledge Hera's relentless persecution as the crucible that forged his legend. Either way, the name sticks like a paradox, a constant reminder that even glory can come wrapped in thorns. Switch to Latin, and Hercules carries its own secrets. The Romans didn't just translate the name, they reshaped it, smoothing the Greek kles into the more muscular kles, a suffix that echoed their own ideals of strength and civic virtue. But here's the fascinating part. While the Greeks emphasized his struggles, the Romans reframed his name as a badge of triumph. Inscriptions across the empire hail him as Hercules Invictus, unconquered Hercules, a title that turned his labors into a metaphor for Rome's own unstoppable rise. The shift isn't just linguistic, it's ideological, proving how a name can be polished like a shield to reflect the values of the culture wielding it. Now dig deeper and you'll find whispers of something even older. The kles suffix in Heracles isn't unique to him. It appears in other Mycenaean names like Pericles, surrounded by glory, and Sophocles, glorious wisdom. This wasn't just flair, it was social coding, a way to telegraph status or aspiration. Linear bead tablets from Pylos mention warriors with similar epithets, suggesting Heracles might have started as a title for a particularly celebrated fighter, later personified into a single, superhuman figure. Imagine a Bronze Age battlefield where Heracles wasn't a name, but a shout of praise, like calling a champion the glory of Sparta today. Over centuries, the title could have crystallized into a legend, its original bearer lost to time. Even Hera's role in the name might be a red herring. Before she was Zeus's jealous wife, Hera was possibly a pre-Greek earth goddess, her name linked to words for lady or protector. In this light, glory of Hera takes on a different hue, less about divine spite, more about earthly patronage. Could Hercules have begun as a local hero championed by a now-forgotten cult of Hera, only for later storytellers to flip the script? It wouldn't be the first time myths rewrote their own origins. The real clue might lie in the sheer ubiquity of his name's structure. From the Phoenician Melkart, king of the city, to the Mesopotamian Gilgamesh, the ancestor is a hero. Ancient hero names often followed a formula: divine element plus achievement. Hercules fits the pattern like a glove, suggesting he wasn't just a person, but an archetype, a blank space where cultures could inscribe their own ideals of heroism. So when you say Hercules, you're not just invoking a demigod, you're unlocking a linguistic time capsule, one that holds the echoes of countless forgotten warriors, each clamoring for their share of glory. The 12 labors of Hercules might seem like a checklist of monster battles, but peel back the layers and they reveal something far more profound, a blueprint for human struggle. Take the Nemean lion, a beast no weapon could pierce. On the surface, it's a feat of brute strength, but dig deeper, and it becomes a metaphor for facing problems that defy conventional solutions. Hercules doesn't win by hacking at the lion. He wins by adapting, using his bare hands to strangle it, then turning its own claws against it. Sound familiar? It's the ancient equivalent of modern therapy's advice. Sometimes you can't fight trauma with force alone. You have to outthink it, endure it, and repurpose its power. Then there's the Augean stables, a task so Sisyphean it would break most people. But Hercules doesn't just shovel manure, he reroutes rivers, transforming an impossible chore into an engineering triumph. This isn't just a story about cleaning, it's about systemic change. In a world where we're often told to grind harder, Hercules' solution is startlingly modern. Efficiency beats effort. The labor mirrors today's productivity hacks, where working smarter, not longer, is the key to breaking free of life's messiest cycles. But the Hydra is where the allegory truly ignites. Every time Hercules lops off a head, two grow back until he realizes fire stops the regeneration. It's a perfect parallel for addiction, grief, or any problem that seems to multiply when you confront it head-on. The lesson isn't just persistence, it's the need for a fundamental shift in approach. Modern psychology calls this root cause work, the idea that surface-level fixes often fail unless you cauterize the source. Hercules' fiery solution predates cognitive behavioral therapy by millennia, yet the principle is identical. Some battles require burning away the patterns that feed them. Even the lesser-known labors crackle with symbolism. The golden hind, a deer so swift it's nearly impossible to catch, becomes a stand-in for elusive goals: happiness, fulfillment, or self-acceptance. Hercules spends a year chasing it, learning patience and strategy, only to release it unharmed in the end. The message: some pursuits aren't about possession, but the growth that comes from the hunt. Meanwhile, the Stymphalian birds, whose metallic feathers rain death, could represent toxic relationships or negative self-talk forces that seem small until they swarm. Hercules scares them off with clappers, a reminder that noise, boundary setting, therapy, even art can disrupt the cycles that haunt us. What makes these myths timeless isn't their monsters, but their mirrors. Hercules' labors aren't just about overcoming external obstacles, they're about the internal work required to do so. His rage, his grief, his moments of doubt, they humanize him, making his victories feel earned rather than handed down by fate. In an age obsessed with hustle culture and overnight success, Hercules' slow, painful progress feels radical. He doesn't win because he's half God. He wins because he keeps showing up, adapting, and occasionally failing forward. The real magic lies in how these stories refuse to age. A therapist today might reframe the Hydra as trauma, the stables as burnout, the hind as mindfulness. Self-help gurus spin the same lessons, just with fewer lions, but Hercules' version has one advantage: it doesn't promise quick fixes. His path to redemption is messy, non-linear, and littered with setbacks. That's why his myth still resonates, not as a tale of perfection, but as a map for anyone who's ever faced a labor of their own and wondered if they're strong enough to endure it. Spoiler: you just might need to set a few things on fire first. Superman's origin story could be ripped straight from Hercules' playbook. A child sent to Earth from the heavens, gifted with godlike strength, destined to protect humanity from threats both mundane and monstrous. The parallels aren't accidental. When Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster crafted the Man of Steel in 1938, they tapped into the same archetype the Greeks immortalized: the outsider who uses his gifts for good despite the loneliness it brings. Like Hercules, Superman's journey is one of isolation and sacrifice. His home planet, Krypton, is his Mount Olympus, his adoptive parents the humble mortals who shape his morality. Even his villains mirror Hercules' trials. Lex Luthor's cunning echoes Eurystheus' treachery. while Doomsday's unstoppable brutality recalls the Hydra's regenerative fury. But here's the twist: where Hercules' strength often led to tragedy, Superman's is tempered by Midwestern humility, a modern rebranding of the hero's struggle to balance power with compassion. Harry Potter, though lacking bulging biceps, shares Hercules' most defining trait, a destiny etched in blood and prophecy. The boy who lived didn't ask for his scars, just as Hercules never chose Hera's wrath. Both are marked by fate, forced into battles against forces far older and crueler than themselves. Voldemort, like the Hydra, grows stronger with each confrontation, his Horcruxes multiplying like the monster's heads. Dumbledore plays the role of Chiron, the wise mentor who guides but cannot shield his pupil from suffering. Even Harry's final walk into the Forbidden Forest mirrors Hercules' descent into the underworld, a confrontation with death itself, fueled by love rather than valor. J.K. Rowling didn't just borrow Hercules' template, she humanized it, swapping a club for a wand and labors for homework, proving that heroism isn't about muscles but resilience. Wonder Woman, born of clay and Zeus's breath, is perhaps the most direct heir to Hercules' mythic DNA. Her origin, literally rewritten as Zeus's daughter in 2011, positions her as a demigod grappling with dual identities. Where Hercules wrestled lions, Diana battles Ares. Where he sought redemption, she fights for justice. But the key difference lies in agency. Hercules' labors were punishments, while Wonder Woman's battles are choices. This shift reflects how modern audiences crave heroes who aren't just reactive, but proactive women and men who wield power not because they must, but because they should. Even anti-heroes like Wolverine carry Hercules' torch, albeit rusted and bloodstained. Logan's healing factor is his Nemean lion pelt, his adamantium claws the modern equivalent of a golden club. His berserker rages mirror Hercules' madness, but where the ancient hero's violence was a divine curse, Wolverine's is self-inflicted, a metaphor for PTSD and the cost of survival. The X-Men's outcast status echoes Hercules' alienation, reframed for an era that distrusts institutions and champions the marginalized. Why do these archetypes persist? Because societies always need vessels for their anxieties and aspirations. Hercules' labors spoke to Bronze Age fears of chaos. Superman's battles against robots and aliens channeled 20th century technological dread. Harry Potter's war against pure blood supremacy mirrors contemporary fights against bigotry. Each era molds its Hercules to fit its demons, but the core remains. A figure who proves that even the most ordinary among us, whether farm boys, bullied orphans, or disillusioned warriors, can bear extraordinary burdens. The labors change, but the lesson doesn't. Heroism isn't about winning, it's about enduring, and as long as humanity faces trials, we'll keep resurrecting Hercules in whatever form helps us believe we can, too. The Nemean lion wasn't just a monster. It was an ecological disaster incarnate. Ancient Greeks knew the terror of predators decimating livestock, and Hercules' battle with the beast reads like a mythologized version of humanity's eternal struggle to protect their flocks from nature's fury. But here's the twist: the lion's invulnerable hide suggests something deeper. What if this wasn't just about killing a predator, but learning to coexist with it? By using the lion's own claws to skin it, Hercules turns the creature's power against itself, a metaphor for sustainable hunting practices that honor the balance of the wild. The pelt he wears afterward isn't just a trophy, it's a reminder that true strength lies in adaptation, not domination. Then there's the Orgeon stables, a labor that feels ripped from an ancient environmental cleanup manual. Diverting 2 rivers to wash away decades of filth, isn't just a feat of engineering, it's a Bronze Age parable about the consequences of unchecked pollution. Greek city-states relied on clean waterways for survival, and the stable's grotesque accumulation of waste would have resonated with audiences who knew the stench of contaminated wells. Hercules' solution, working with the rivers rather than against them, mirrors modern permaculture principles, where human systems align with natural flows instead of bulldozing through them. The labor's deeper lesson: ecological neglect isn't just unsightly, it's a threat to civilization itself. The Lernaean Hydra takes this further, embodying the terrifying reality of problems that multiply when mishandled. Ancient marshes like Lerna were vital ecosystems, but also breeding grounds for disease. Malaria lurked in those waters, its symptoms perhaps inspiring the Hydra's venomous blood. Every head Hercules chops off becomes two, mirroring how draining wetlands without understanding their role could unleash new crop blights or water shortages. His eventual victory, cauterizing the stumps, hints at an early understanding of systemic solutions. Sometimes you don't fight nature, you redirect its energy. Even the lesser-known labors crackle with environmental wisdom. The Cyrenian hind, sacred to Artemis, teaches restraint. Hercules spends a year tracking the golden horned deer without harming it, a nod to hunting taboos that protected keystone species. The Stymphalian birds, with their metallic feathers, might represent invasive species or industrial runoff, their destruction requiring tools clappers forged by Hephaestus that symbolize technology's double-edged role in ecological crises. Fast forward to modern myths, and the parallels are striking. Where Hercules rerouted rivers, Mad Max, Fury Road's heroes battle over water scarcity. The Hydra's multiplying heads find echoes in climate change narratives, where solving one symptom often exacerbates another. Even children's films like Mona reframe Hercules' labors as environmental stewardship. Her confrontation with the lava demon Tikar mirrors the demigod's battles, but with redemption replacing conquest. What these stories share is a recognition that heroes aren't just conquerors, they're mediators between humanity and the natural world. The ancients wrapped ecological warnings in monster battles because they understood a truth we're rediscovering. Survival isn't about dominating nature, but deciphering its language. Hercules' greatest labor wasn't slaying beasts, it was learning to listen to the earth beneath his feet. Gilgamesh, the Sumerian king carved into clay tablets 4,000 years ago, could be Hercules' long-lost twin. Both are sons of gods. Gilgamesh's mother is the goddess Ninsun, just as Hercules claims Zeus as his father. Both wrestle lions, battle monstrous foes, and journey to the edges of the known world in search of immortality. But where Hercules' labors are imposed as punishment, Gilgamesh's adventures spring from grief. After his wild counterpart Enkidu dies, the king's desperate quest to conquer death mirrors Hercules' own descent into the underworld. The parallels don't stop there. The cedar forest Gilgamesh slays Humbaba to protect. Think of it as the Nemean lion's Mesopotamian cousin, another symbol of nature's untamed chaos subdued by human will. Even their endings echo. Hercules achieves godhood through fire, while Gilgamesh, though mortal, secures eternal fame through the very epic that bears his name. These aren't coincidences, they're proof that across continents and millennia, humans have always craved heroes who stare down mortality and laugh. Now leap across the globe to India, where Hanuman, the monkey god of the Ramayana, swings into the mythic spotlight with his own Herculean resume. Born of the wind god Vayu, Hanuman shares Hercules' divine lineage and superhuman strength. He once lifted an entire mountain to retrieve healing herbs. His leap across the ocean to Lanka rivals Hercules' journey to the Garden of the Hesperides, both feats blending physical prowess with spiritual significance. But Hanuman adds a layer Hercules rarely explores: devotion. Where Hercules' strength serves his redemption, Hanuman serves Lord Rama, embodying the ideal of selfless service. Yet their stories intersect in surprising ways. When Hanuman's tail is set aflame by demons, a scene eerily reminiscent of Hercules' flaming arrows against the Hydra, he turns the fire against his enemies, showcasing the same cunning in crisis that defines the Greek hero. The takeaway: heroism isn't just about muscle, it's about adaptability. Whether you're a demigod or a divine monkey, even the Americas have their counterparts. Among the Aztecs, Quetzalcoatl the feathered serpent shares Hercules' role as a civilizing force. Though more deity than demigod, Quetzalcoatl's journey to the underworld to retrieve bones and create humanity mirrors Hercules' rescue missions. His battles with monstrous forces like Tzitzimitl, the star demons, parallel Hercules' clashes with chthonic beasts. Meanwhile, in North America, the Algonquin hero Glooskap slays a giant beaver dam that's flooding the land, a labor that could easily sit alongside Hercules' redirection of the Alpheus River. These echoes suggest something profound. Cultures separated by oceans still sculpted heroes to solve the same existential puzzles: how to tame nature, how to cheat death, how to bridge the human and the divine. What binds these figures together isn't just their feats, but their flaws. Gilgamesh's arrogance, Hanuman's mischievousness, Quetzalcoatl's exile, like Hercules' rage, they humanize the superhuman. These traits aren't accidents, they're narrative keystones, reminding us that true heroism requires overcoming internal demons as much as external ones. The shared DNA of these myths points to a universal truth: every culture needs its Hercules, not because strength is rare, but because the struggle to wield it wisely is eternal. Whether carved in cuneiform, sung in Sanskrit, or painted on temple walls, these stories are more than entertainment. They're the world's oldest self-help manuals, teaching us that monsters may change their shapes, but the courage to face them remains the same. Even in the age of space travel and artificial intelligence, Hercules' shadow looms large, not just in museums or movie theaters, but in the way we understand human potential. Psychologists coined the term Hercules complex to describe individuals driven by an insatiable need to prove their strength, often at the cost of personal well-being. It's that voice whispering, "Just one more labor, then you'll be enough." Sound familiar? Modern therapy rooms are filled with modern-day Hercules overachievers burning out, not from lions or hydras, but from endless emails and unrealistic expectations. The myth's brilliance lies in its foresight. It warned us 4,000 years ago that unchecked ambition is its own kind of monster, one no club can slay. Athletics, too, is steeped in his legacy. Walk into any gym and you'll see his influence not just in statues of muscular ideals, but in the ethos of pushing past limits. When a marathon runner hits the wall at mile 20, they're channeling Hercules dragging Cerberus from the underworld. The difference: today's labors come with protein shakes and physio tape. Consider the Olympic Games, where athletes compete for laurels instead of redemption, yet the archetype remains: struggle transformed into spectacle. Even the term Herculean effort has slipped into everyday speech, a shorthand for tasks that feel impossible until they're done. Brands have hijacked his symbolism with equal fervor. From energy drinks named after his labors to fitness empires built on his silhouette, Hercules sells because he represents transformation. But there's irony here where the myth warns of glory's cost. Advertising promises it painlessly. A car commercial might show a suburban dad lifting groceries like they're the Golden Hind, subtly implying that buying the right SUV will make him heroic. The dissonance is striking. Ancient myths treated strength as a burden. Capitalism repackages it as a commodity. Yet beneath the pop culture veneer, Hercules' deepest lesson endures. Greatness and brokenness often share the same skin. His story resonates because it's not a straight line from zero to hero, but a messy spiral of failure and grit. Think of a single mother working 3 jobs, or a refugee rebuilding a life. Their labors may lack mythical beasts, but the emotional blueprint is identical. What makes Hercules timeless isn't his muscles, it's his humanity. He's a mirror reflecting our best and worst selves, proof that heroism isn't about perfection, but the courage to keep going when every fiber screams quit. Perhaps that's why his myth outlasts empires. In a world obsessed with flawless Instagram feeds and overnight success, Hercules is the antidote, a reminder that scars are part of the story, and that redemption isn't found in never falling, but in rising each time. The next time you face your own hydra, whether it's a layoff, a loss, or just a bad day, remember, you're not wrestling a monster, you're joining a lineage as old as time, one labored breath at a time. From the blood-soaked sands of ancient Thebes to the shimmering constellations above, Hercules' legacy is a tapestry woven with equal parts myth and memory. We've traced the footsteps of a hero who might have been a flesh and blood warrior, a Mycenaean warlord, a Phoenician sailor, or even a dozen forgotten strongmen merged into one legendary figure. The ruins of Turin whisper his name on crumbling tablets, while temple frescoes from Cadiz to Thebes paint him in strokes of gold and gore. Yet for every archaeological clue, the lion skin motifs in Bronze Age graves, the flood-scoured valleys that mirror his labors, there's a counter-argument that Hercules was always a story, a collective dream of what humanity could endure. And that's the magic of his duality. He doesn't have to be either historical or fictional. He's both, a mirror held up to our timeless need for heroes who bleed like us but conquer like gods. Think of the labors not as chores but as chapters in humanity's oldest self-help book. The Hydra teaches us that some battles grow fiercer the harder you fight until you change tactics. The Augean stables remind us that true strength isn't just muscle. It's ingenuity, redirecting rivers instead of shoveling filth. Even Hercules' darkest hour, the murder of his family, isn't glorified. It's a gut-wrenching lesson that rage unchecked turns even heroes into monsters. These aren't just adventures, they're blueprints for resilience, coded in symbols that transcend language and time. Culturally, Hercules is a shapeshifter. To the Greeks, he was a tragic strongman clawing toward redemption. To the Romans, a polished statesman in a lion's cloak. To the Phoenicians, he was Melkart, guardian of sea lanes and city gates. Today, he's a superhero, a meme, a gym logo, proof that myths don't fossilize, they evolve. His face on a Starbucks cup or his name on a space shuttle isn't dilution, it's survival. The greatest legends aren't statues, they're mirrors reflecting whatever we need them to be. So was Hercules real? The answer might lie in the wrong question. What matters isn't whether one man inspired the tales, but why those tales refuse to die. They endure because they speak to something primal in us, the part that still believes monsters can be slain, that curses can be outlasted, that even the broken can rise. When a nurse works back-to-back shifts or a refugee rebuilds a life, they're not wearing a lion's skin, but they're walking the same path. Hercules' power isn't in his club, it's in his refusal to stay down. Now it's your turn. When you look at Hercules through the lens of history, myth, or your own struggles, what do you see? A Bronze Age king turned legend? A metaphor for human grit, or something else entirely? Drop your thoughts below and keep the conversation going. After all, the best myths never really end. They just wait for the next voice to carry them forward.